Duality is something that rules our lives in very nature. We cannot have the light without the shadow, or the yin without its yang, or love without hate. But love-hate is more than just a hard rock band fronted by singer, songwriter, and nonfiction scribe Jizzy Pearl. Yes, I said Jizzy Pearl. It is the topic of tonight's Noise Junkies episode. We will delve into some of our select delights and repugnant frights for your hopeful delights. And to quote the great Mr. Pearl himself, so you're going to paint the town red, it's party time. Gonna turn bad to maybe? Anyways, welcome to Noise Junkies. I am Heather Drain, and I have the two most bitchin' dudes with me, my Noise Junkies brothers. We have Father Malone.
Hey, everybody. We don't rest in peace. We just disappear.
Cuckoo-cuckoo. And we got HP. HP, welcome.
Hello, folks. Good evening. Glad to be here.
It's been a while. We appreciate everybody's patience. At the Noise Junkies, we are back in the saddle again. Just like Aerosmith, but with less heroin and commercial sellouts. And I love Aerosmith. I shouldn't have made that joke. I'm sorry. 70s Aerosmith.
Yeah,
okay.
They are commercial sellouts. I mean, you're not wrong.
No, that's 100%. Hey, my fellas, what have you guys been listening to lately?
So the new music has been a little bit thin on the ground for me lately. So I'm kind of going back to one of my favorite albums. I don't know what prompted me to get back into this, but I'm listening to the debut by the one and only Black Sabbath. The album Black Sabbath, self-titled by you guys did Black Sabbath. It's one of my favorite albums. It's an outlier in their catalog. I think it was kind of the bridge between them when they were Earth. That's right, they were Earth, kind of a blues band before they became the band we all know and love. But that's what I love about it. It's really it's bluesy, it's sort of proggy in a way that they really didn't allow themselves to be in future LPs. Not that there's anything wrong with what they became. It's fantastic, but this is such a unique album in their catalog. The jams just kind of seem to go on forever, and the production is incredible. The guitar playing is just, he blows my mind. I hear new things every time I listen to it. And Bill Ward is just a beast. He's so much more jazzy and kind of in the pocket in this than I think he was ever really allowed to be in later Sabbath albums. So that's what I'm listening to. Heather, what are you listening to these days?
Oh my God! Well, first up, give it up to Bill Ward, one of my favorite drummers of all time. I love him.
He's a killer.
Yes, and you can never go wrong with Black Sabbath. But I have been listening to both are new discovery for me. One of them is actually a newish entity. It's actually a band called Dr. Gasp and the Eeks.
Wow.
And
that is a name.
Well, every year I always like to try and discover new songs for what I consider my ultimate Halloween playlist. And I love Halloween music. And this is actually a side project by New England folk singer Dan Blakesley. And they have a song called She Vampire Tamer. And it is...
I sweep her up from where she's laying. Up to the curb she will be staying. She will be mine. I'll drink her like wine.
He had such a rich voice, and the song is very cheeky and fun and spooky, and it's kind of sexy, which you don't really typically think of with most Halloween music, of having a sensual side. Of course, then again, I would be the kind of clown hog that would see that and listen to that, but I love it. And the other one is a 1967 garage rock band called Calico Wall with their song, I'm a Living Sickness.
Yet apart within myself. You can see me when I'm home, for I'm here, but yet I'm not. And I'm sick with the well people, so prove them if you want. Cause I'm a living sickness, sick with just myself.
sinister psych rock, total like Nuggets Pebbles action. The sound, that lo-fi organ sound just sounds like you're on a bad trip. It's stunning. Those are my current listens. And what about you, Father Malone?
I kind of quoted them at the top of the show. I've been listening to the Distillers' Sing Sing Death House on repeat. I know it's like late in their catalog and it's a little too melodic for most people, and Brody Dahl is actually like singing and not just growling like a fucking demon from hell, but I consider it like one of their better albums.
Look around in a red sound here. We don't recipes, we just disappear. So here we are, Los Angeles. No way, just singing in the belly of one knee. I watch the sun roll down the Pacific over Hoogie Sunset Strip. They say this is the
City of Angels is fucking killer on every level. It transcends whatever genre that song is emerging from, and Brody Dahl is just adore her. I once drove to fucking Anaheim to see a Brody Dahl solo show, and it was worth it, even though it was in Anaheim. That's all I'll say. So the Distillers, if you don't know them, folks, of course you do, but if you don't, Distillers, Sing Sing Death House. Delicious. That Young Crazed Peeling, that's a song about her growing up in fucking Australia and her mom and everything.
I love a man from California. He's the prettiest and we got the same disorder. Why you feel it's okay. It's never gonna change
Anyway, go listen to the Distillers, everybody.
Today, we are talking about a few select questions and things dealing with love and hate. You cannot have one without the other. I think when you're passionate about anything in life, it's going to be natural to have some things that that are like part of your DNA. You love them so much. And then other things that you're just like, I want to set that on fire with my mind. And so I thought it'd be kind of cool. And I like us having the balance because I think there's so much negativity out there. We don't ever want to contribute to anything that's just negative. Like even when we're negative, it's like with piss and vinegar and fun and
we
humor.
want to be negative.
But it's like a Molotov cocktail of awesome. You know, it's like being mugged by a bunch of clowns. Because like that's terrible, you got mugged, but it's literally clowns. Like
if you
have
were watching
clown light
it
on you.
It would be the funniest thing ever.
Yeah. Would you slow dance with a clown?
Me?
Either one.
He has, I'll bet.
Have you?
Yeah, probably. I deal with a lot of...
No, you would remember that.
A lot of carnival...
If you're not sure, you didn't do it.
No, listen. I've been around a lot of clowns. A lot of carny folk. I'm not saying it didn't happen.
Oh my God.
I'm trying to... See, in my mind, I'm thinking, have I danced with a full-sized bozo-looking clown? And no, definitely not. But have I danced with a 3-foot clown? Yeah, now that I think of it, I have. So... Yes, I have
awesome.
slow danced with a clown.
Did you say a 3-foot tall clown?
Correct. I have friends in low places.
We're going to start with question number 1. And this one is, of course, musical trends, which I don't know about you guys. Usually when I hear musical trends, I get a little rashy, a little itchy, because I'm just instinctively just make art that you love. Don't worry about trends. Fuck trends. But I think it's good for me to get outside my own comfort zone. And so I was like, this could be interesting. And I originally written, which one of the past 20 years have you enjoyed the most? Now, when I say 20 years, my sense of time is bad. So that could be 40 years, whatever strikes you guys.
Oh, no, you don't say that now.
I said it earlier in a message, sir.
No, listen, madam.
Sir, madam.
Yes, I did the 20-year constraint, and that's what you're getting.
Mine was a little more loosey-goosey. Mine's
God
about 25 to 30 years.
HP.
Hell yeah, the H is in solidarity. We don't need no fucking rules. That's true, but I appreciate your adherence. And so we'll start with you since you did your due diligence.
Okay.
Father Malone.
No, this is trends, right?
Mm-hmm. Which one did you love?
Okay.
We're doing love.
Mine actually has roots a little bit earlier than the 20-year thing. And actually began kind of in the early 90s. There was a proliferation of what people were calling trip-hop. Bands like Portishead.
Oh, you fucking asshole!
Hi, everybody. Portishead and Tricky. And,
also, that's more than 20 years.
You know, Massive Attack, I think, falls into the trip-hop thing. But here's the thing. No, I'm looking at HP's list, apparently. Okay. I get it. He picked the same thing, but you didn't actually, because here's the thing. The thing I loved about trip hop was like all the weirdo influences that sort of came through in the music, like 70s B movies and like 60s soundtrack music and sampled dialogues and loops. But all of those influences, in my mind, kind of came to a fruition in the early 2000s with something called hauntology. Hauntology. You know this one, HP, right? See, I'm not even dealing with trip hop. I'm dealing with trip hop's kid, basically.
This is great. Do tell.
Hauntology is very specific to around 2005, 6. It's it's very British in its origin. It's a lot of retrofuturism. So it's beats using instruments that were once meant to evoke the future, but they're so old now that they're ancient. So it recontextualizes sound. So it's like music from the future, but rooted in the past. It's very, very interesting. The major kind of people that were operating at the time were Larry Pauling. And the Advisory Circle. But better than all of them is a band called the Focus Group. It's a collage of all of the stuff I've mentioned, and gets really, really dizzying. This movement also kind of trafficked in what wouldn't become popular or become popular again until Stranger Things became so popular, and that is the use of synth, like 80s type synth. Like it's all over hauntology. And I think it even influenced like vaporwave and everything else. So as far as my favorite trends for the past 20 years specifically, I think this one kind of qualifies.
So while we're on the subject of trip hop,
were we?
That's why we were. We kind of went beyond it, but now we're going to take it back to the old school of trip hop, and we're going to go back to, I consider, for me, it was ground zero for trip hop. It was sort of the Rosetta Stone, if you will, of trip hop, and for me, it all began with DJ Shadow's debut album, Introducing. This was an album that it absolutely floored me when I first heard it. I had read a review of it. It had a lot of buzz behind it. And the word was that this guy was creating whole new worlds using nothing more than an MPC. And he did that and more. It expanded what I thought the vocabulary of music at that time could be. To your point, Father Malone, taking old beats, everything from David Axelrod to Metallica to advertisements and LL Cool J, shout-outs, hip-hop, and just blending them up into this incredible concoction that I guess we now call trip-hop. And it eventually, the timelines are a little fuzzy for me with some of the sort of bands and groups that were tangential to that, but I would also put in the same category, as you already said, Portishead, their debut album, Dummy.
Did you really want? Did you really want?
Fantastic. UNKLE, which is cheating a little bit because it's a DJ Shadow project with James Lavelle, with a lot of guest artists, including Mike D from Beastie Boys.
Story to tell with DJ Shadow and James Lavelle. It starts right now.
incredible. And then later, bands like the Chemical Brothers. I think Dig Your Own Hole was another album. It's not necessarily trip hop in its execution, but it's certainly, in my mind, indebted to trip hop. But if I'm looking for my favorite sort of trend or of the last 20, 30, 35 years, let's say, because I think Introducing was somewhere around 96. This is, like I said, I go back to Introducing all the time. It's an accomplishment that will never be equaled. It's often copied, but never mastered in quite the way that including his own catalog. DJ Shadow is fabulous, and he's had an incredible sort of discography, but they will never come close to Introducing. So trip hop is my go-to for the favorite trend of the last years. How about you, Heather?
Can I weigh in on
Absolutely.
Portishead's album, Dummy? It's a perfect fucking album. And
unquestionably.
And what I liked about them, particularly, is they weren't satisfied with the sound of their own music to the point where they took that, they made a vinyl, then they re-recorded the album with the scratches and the pops. That's how dedicated they were to that old-time sound. I love that album. I love all the bands you mentioned, HP, but that is an album I can listen to, and no matter what the mood, it will put me into a Portishead mood.
Move over and give us some room, yeah. Give me a reason.
It's something you said when you were talking about hauntology, which I think holds true for a lot of what I've described about trip hop, is what strikes me about it when I think about it is the timelessness of these albums. These albums are now 30 plus years old, let's say, but they sound just as fresh and innovative now as they did when they were released. And I think that's clearly the mark of genius and the mark of a classic recording.
I'm curious what an 18-year-old would think about hearing Glory Box, but I agree with you. To me, it sounds like the album just came out, but we're old, maybe.
Probably.
Yeah, because for me, like, instead of going into genres or anything like that, I was thinking in terms of like what's affected music as a whole and music accessibility, and especially for where artists are concerned, because I've heard, we've all heard a lot of people, and there's legitimacy too about complaints about, like, with the internet, obviously with artists, it's like, it's getting access to money, but that's the thing, musicians have always been, unfortunately, like, fucked over by the industry. And I feel like, especially in the last 20 years, we're seeing more and more artists be able to make a go of it independently, truly on their own, because of the internet. And we also have so much more accessibility. And I'm thinking like sites like Bandcamp, even like social media. I've actually discovered bands. There's an artist in particular I'm a huge fan of, her name is actually Huizinga. And her band right now is Patriarchy. At the time I discovered her, she was just under the name Actually. But I discovered her through Tumblr, of all things. And
good for something.
I know. Well, and I mean, that was like 10 years ago, and I'm still a huge fan. And the thing is, like, I feel like anything that can kind of like further drive the stake into the dinosaur that is the music industry is a good thing, and I definitely would like to see artists get more money in general. And AI's bullshit, that's not even a debate that we'll get into, because I think we're all on the same page. But and that's why I definitely encourage. But I think most people that are music fans, like, everybody's like, oh, the internet, I think if you're a music fan, if you're like us, if you hear something you like, you want to support that artist. Like, I have heard so many things online that I use that to inform my opinion, and as well as to learn about a lot of different bands. I mean, so for me, like, the trend 20 years is basically how artists, like, their social media presence, their ability to make more money just being their own entity. They are their own record label, a lot of times. And I just got an album, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce the band's name because I will severely butcher it because they're Polish. But like, I got into a dark wave band from Poland. Like,
Of course you did.
It's very on brand. Very on brand for me.
I'd be very surprised if you didn't say what you just said.
But I mean, but think about it. I hate nostalgia when people, I'll hear people be like, oh, I miss MTV when they played music videos. Most of the stuff MTV wouldn't have touched. And nobody loves the music video format, I would say, more than me. I mean, I'm literally working on a book about its history right now. But let's face it. And, you know, in some ways, you have to work harder, but you can work smarter, not harder too. And with access to sites and to things, you can use something like Spotify, which isn't the best at paying artists, but you can use that to inform an opinion to go out and support that artist and find them. And we are flirting with, and we may be pulling the trigger very soon on Noise Junkie Spotify playlists.
That's a great idea.
That's a fucking great idea.
Sign me up.
Heck yes. You guys don't mind. I'm going to segue into my own bullshit here, because that's right. Fuck around and find out with me, Heather Train, with music industry trends. And for me, one of them, and speaking of the beast, is the absolute Clear Channel, like Harkonnen like entity that is major radio. I mean, no wonder people are flocking to the internet and things like Spotify, because the few times in the last few years, like especially like, you know, in my day job, I'll hear regular radio and it's fucking atrocious. And I mean, it wasn't great when I was a kid, because already, like, I grew up in the 90s and the 80s, and even then, like, unless you were somewhere that had a really cool college station, radio was already getting pretty prickly. And classic rock radio, especially, where it's, you know, we'll play good bands, but yeah, according to classic rock radio, the Kinks only did Lola and You Really Got Me Going, and maybe 2 other songs. The Kinks have 30 albums. Like, at least. Like,
what?
Kinks,
No.
I know. You know,
3 singles, I think, right? A couple of B-sides.
And what's sad is, like, now they're starting to play, like, the grunge stuff. But it's, I mean, some of those bands aren't as prolific because a lot of them don't stay around that long. But they still had more than one song. Like, I mean, it's the most trough. It's a fucking trough for listeners. And, I mean, if you're going to treat me like a piggy, at least put a ribbon on me. I don't know. I don't know if I was going with that analogy. But I'm just saying, Clear Channel and all of that is evil. And I'm sure there's downsides, but I've heard legends and tales. I mean, it's like it's way older than it is, but like it wasn't even that long ago where you could have DJs play a whole side of an album. I mean, that was like the 70s. But I mean, there were songs that became major hits because of DJs just being like, I'm going to play this. That's how, I mean, there were B-sides that became #1 hits back in the day. It's just because of a DJ being like, I like this one better, and they did it, and it took off.
I agree. This plays into what you were saying previously, that it's a little more democratized now, that you can make the music and distribute the music on your own, which is fantastic. The problem is we need to figure out a way where we can all be privy to it in the way that you're describing, the DJ who goes, hey everyone, you're just going to listen to this album for however long I'm going to play it, you know? Down and say, you're listening to this right now.
But it really is a double-edged sword, because I can come at it like my experience. This isn't necessarily related to radio, but I have a little Bandcamp site for some songs that I've written, and I have a couple albums up there. But it's, yes, folks don't have to grovel in front of a record executive to get their music recorded and promoted and everything. So that's all great.
They don't have to go down on their knees in an office. Probably yours.
You know, probably yours. But at the same time, it's almost too much of a good thing. Like, now the challenge is there's all this great music that people can, frankly, they can just record in their bedrooms or what have you, their home studios. There's just too many places to go for music, too many musicians, too many bands. Like, how does one differentiate themselves and get their music promoted and heard?
Well, that's one of the things I really have enjoyed about Spotify, is that you can search other people's playlists. That's how I discovered Dr. Gasp, was just like randomly kind of researching other playlists. And just being like, hey, what's this sound like? And a lot of times it's, it's like anything else. I mean, it's kind of like a Whitman sampler, but every so often you're like, ooh, what's that? And you like it. And that's the thing. I always really try to encourage people. I think us doing this show helps too. I think every little seed you can plant, because the alternative is, what we're hearing on major radio and what we went through, even in the MTV days where it's just like, a handful will get all the glory and everybody else you have to, like, gosh, I mean, in some ways I do kind of miss, like, I hate nostalgia. I do miss the treasure hunt aspect a little bit of culture seeking pre-internet, but at the same time, I love the availability we have now. I love the fact that, like, some kid in the Midwest can record an album because they heard the band Can on Spotify, and they were like, they're hearing krautrock and they're like, holy shit, I love this, and they can make their own album inspired by that. I mean, it does make it harder, but for me, like, it makes the rewards that much richer. And it also, to me, is taking the energy away from just the big bloated, stuff that's just been like, it's like a dying tick that's been feeding off the blood of art for decades. Think about all the bluesmen. Like, think how much money, like I don't know, that's the other thing. I should have made that my hate. Like, all the
that was a little earlier than 20 years.
Yeah,
First of all, I believe Harkonnen is the proper pronunciation.
Oh!
Secondly, I want to apologize to the ghost of John Lennon for my terrible impression.
The point I was going to make a little bit earlier is, and maybe this is just me, but for me, the idea of like radio, music, anything that's not like talk radio or like that has been dead to me for, it feels like forever. I couldn't even tell you the last time I listened. No. I'm not trying to put anything down. I just can't remember the last time I put on the radio in my car and listened to a radio station. Like, because I'm just so conditioned. Because first of all, I'm rarely going to hear what I want to hear. I put all the music on my phone, or I listen to Spotify on the phone, and I just plug it into my car, and that's what I listen to. But do you guys like listen to the radio in your car, or you're home?
Every day?
Really?
I listen to. No, I do. Honestly, when I'm driving in the car, is the only time I get to listen to what I consider random music. But I only listen to classical stations, so it's not it isn't as mind numbing and grating as listening to the same fucking Lynyrd Skynyrd songs over and over again on any random classic rock station you're going to put on. Like, do I need to hear Flock of Seagulls one more time? Probably not. I don't.
This is my point. Like, any classical is different because that's like preserved in amber forever. You know what I mean? Like, that's never going to change. It's always going to be, probably supported by public.
Oh, there's lots
funding.
of there's lots of contemporary music that's classical.
Kenny G.
Kenny G. Oh man, are you equating what I'm listening to that? Do you know that I was at Amoeba? I was at Amoeba Records in Los Angeles, and I was looking for some Tangerine Dream, and it was in the New Age section. And
What?
It was in the New Age.
Why?
I don't know.
Why was it a New Age?
I don't know. It broke my heart, though.
That's weird.
Oh, I removed it and brought it over to the electronica.
What is the trend of the last 20 years that you hate, that you want to just throw a car battery at?
It all starts with auto-tune.
Yes.
At some point, hip-hop had kind of evolved into lots of mostly female background vocals, or, a female singer doing the chorus of a song, which is mostly hip-hop. This sort of hybrid between song and a hip-hop tune. And then auto-tune hit the scene, and then all these rappers who can't carry a tune in a bucket got to sing their own choruses. My complaint is not necessarily about auto-tune on its own, because then, after Nicki Minaj hit the scene, and she can actually sing, in addition to rhyming pretty fantastically, then it was all over. Now, what was a novelty, it seemed, or a trend in hip-hop, is just rampant. Like, I like hip-hop because it's spoken, and then you can have a singing sort of flavor to it. But I don't need every hip-hop artist to be on their songs. I just don't. I would like that to stop. That's all. It's a minor thing, but it bugs the shit out of me.
No, I agree 100%. That's it. In a weird way, it ties in with what I'm going to go over. But yeah, hip hop has gone through some interesting changes, and that's fine. All music should evolve over time, but I can hear the bands and the acts that you're describing with this auto-tune bullshit, and I couldn't agree more. Terrible.
Yeah, when I think of autotune, I think of this SNL sketch I saw years ago where it was making fun of the Real Housewives, like having musical careers, and they literally all of them were autotune. There was like a song called "An Apple a Day Keeps the Haters Away." It was funny, but yeah, I mean, autotune's kind of become like the sonic version. Do you guys remember glamour photos? Like, this was very 90s, where yeah, that was huge in my childhood, and I knew girls that would envy other girls that got to go get a glamour shot. But it's basically like you could look like Ernest Borgnine, but they could put enough diffusement and
through sweat socks, not gauze.
And give you huge hair. And I mean, it was kind of disturbing because they would make young girls look like they were like 40-year-old divorcees listening to Don Henley in a smoky bar as they're downing their 5th pink squirrel. That's a lot of detail for that story, but there you go. Painting pictures. HP, open up your heart and let the vitriol shine.
This was so again, I kind of eschewed the idea of a trend, and I kind of made it into what genre. I think that's kind of what Father Malone and I both did with our love picks. But I can't. This, when I think of this, it just puts me in a really bad state of mind that I'm just not happy. The most hated trend for me over the last 20 or so years is the rise of, I guess you could call it new country. You could call it country pop. You could call it whatever. I just call it a big steaming pile of bullshit. It's amazing to me because there's a cultural thing at play here too, because you're listening to it, and if you took it's just basically just auto-tune pop but with a southern twang. And it's amusing to me that the fans of country pop and new country can kind of still look down their noses at like traditional pop, but in reality what they're listening to is nothing more than just pop with, like I said, pop, driving a broken down Ford basically. It puts the hairs in the back of my neck on edge when I hear it.
Cornbread and biscuits, and if it's broke around here, we fix it. I can take y'all where you need to go, down to my hood, back in them woods. We do it different round here, that's right, but we sure do it good, and we do it all night. So if you really want to know how it feels to get off the road, trucks and 4 wheels, jump on in, and man, tell your friends, we'll raise some hell with a blacktop.
That is a ground no one should ever cover. It never works. Lil Nas X, that was a novelty song. That in no way accomplished the fusion of hip-hop and country music.
It was a novelty song, exactly, 100% right. And now, that just full disclosure, I love Johnny Cash. I love Willie Nelson. I love Waylon Jennings. I'm not country averse. I'm not one of these people that says, country, it's just, terrible. I love
Patsy Cline not good enough for you?
Cline is fantastic. Love Patsy
I just
Cline.
noticed that you didn't mention her, that's all.
I'm sorry. I'm just giving examples of the things that I like. Do you want me to list every single country artist that I love? All right, let me do it in reverse.
No, I just want you to mention the best. I want you to mention the best ones. That's all. In fairness, and maybe cross gender lines every once in a while. HB, maybe you could do that.
My pick for the most hated, my personal demon of awful music over the last 20 years or so is country pop.
We've had experience. I think we've all had experience with these new country artists because they're the only thing being ladled out to us these days as representatives of what country can be. And the fact is, one of my 1,000% favorite artists right now is named Lily May.
Maybe one day I will learn, but it's my time in the fire to burn. And there ain't enough water to wash me clean from all I've done and what I've seen. There ain't enough.
Who is as fucking country as you can get, and she's fucking genius. So
I agree with you, Father Malone, that maybe I'm painting with a little bit of a broad brush because there are like Casey Musgraves. I actually enjoy Casey Musgraves because she's country, but she's not like coming at it as she's under no illusions that what she's doing is an amalgam of country and pop and a lot of other kind of cool stuff. And she has a voice, a very singular voice. There are other artists I could put in that same sort of bucket, but my point is, like, there's a very specific audience and it's an assembly line.
Yeah, no, I think it's like anything else. Once you have a genre that is particularly like that is started with the roots, and that roots could be like the roots of punk rock, which is kind of working class, and Misfits Unite, whether it's country music, which was, a genre basically for poor working class rural Americans in a lot of ways, the blues, rap, anything that becomes popular, becomes codified, and it becomes merchandising. It's not treated as art. That doesn't mean there aren't people that aren't working within those milieux that are artists, but I think looking the mainstream for anything that's going to be enlightening, is going to be kind of you're going to get heartbroken pretty quick. But that's why we got the Noise Junkies here. We're not going to lead anybody astray. We're going to tell you guys what is up. And you know what else is up? Our next question. We got words about sounds, people. Music writing that moved you. We're talking, could be a journalist, could be a music biography, could be a historical book, etc. A particular writer. And what music writing in that form has moved you? HP.
I didn't come at this like... this is a book, I want to go into a book that moved me, but it didn't move me because the writing was especially, it touched my soul or something like that. But it moved me in the sense that it made this particular band more cinematic in my mind and kind of, made me look at music in a bit of a different way. Now, you may laugh, but this was a book called Hammer of the Gods by Stephen Davis. This was the biography of Led Zeppelin. I read it when I was in high school. I want to say I was probably, 15. Actually, maybe it might have predated high school, actually. I was probably 14, 15 when I read it. And I was already at the age where I was getting into classic rock a lot more, Led Zeppelin in particular. And no one will ever confuse Hammer of the Gods for being like exquisite literature. But for a teenager, painfully shy, just learning about the music that moved him and kind of getting into bands and discovering an identity through those bands, Hammer of the Gods was for me nothing short of cinematic at that time. It was lurid, it was exciting, it made me want to really dig into the Led Zeppelin catalog because he did a great job not only of getting into the salacious bits of them with all the groupies and everything else,
Sharks,
but he went it. Right.
Let's face it, we're all thinking it. Sharks.
Dun, 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 dun.
It's indelible, and I think Zappa had a song about that too. But Stephen Davis also went into the recordings of these albums and talked a little bit about each song and the production and all that. And it really, like I said, it gave me this sort of widescreen view of this epic story of this band. And 14, 15-year-old HP just ate it up like candy. And it excited me about music, about classic rock, about Led Zeppelin in a way that I hadn't before. So it really kind of kick-started a lot of my fondness and my sort of monomania for classic rock at that time. So that's a primary sort of text for, a teenaged HP, I guess.
HP. In the high school that we shared, I was in an English class where someone was trying to pass that book off as a biography that they wanted to review for an assignment in class. And I remember the teachers going, "No, this is not. What do you?
I have an idea of who that might have been.
What are you
What
are you even thinking?" The teacher said in class. And then I remember this student arguing that, no, you don't understand. They're very, very literate. Their songs are about Lord of the Rings. And I thought, oh,
I mean, that's partially true.
Sure, that
Yeah.
that is true. They also played musical instruments. It doesn't make what you're trying to pass off as a piece of like his history or historical writing.
Yeah.
Like, anyway.
Props. Alone. What is your pick?
Okay, I'm going to be lame and kind of read, but I've been thinking about this a lot, this idea of rock criticism, because let me just read it. I read that, discovering a kindred critic is tough because it's about finding someone who vibrates on your same emotional level. Rock criticism is particularly treacherous territory because, unlike prose or film, the listener is supplying so much of the world of the song that finding a sympathetic critic depends on shared idiosyncrasy. Like a cool older friend, a good critic will expose you to bands, genres, and musicians you never would have been privy to, and yet you'll end up cherishing. But they'll also turn you on to bands and genre and musicians that, though you'll agree to disagree of their merits, historically or musically, you'll still feel enriched of the knowledge of them because it was transmitted to you, and the one that was transmitting. The subject matter, yeah, but the language and the rhythm of the one giving you this information. What's ironic is that I don't actually have a kindred rock critic or journalist. I've admired plenty of them, and I've mined plenty out of criticism and journals that I've read over the years, but there's never been a consistent voice I've been tuned into, which doesn't mean I don't have favorites, because I do, starting with Legs McNeil. He's notoriously connected to punk through Punk, the magazine he co-founded, and you can debate it all you want, but he basically named a genre of music. He put out a book called Please Kill Me, The Uncensored Oral History of Punk, which is a good book, even if you're overly familiar with the players and the scene. But that's not my favorite. My favorite is inspired by that book, and that was put out by a guy named Mark Spitz, who's the other guy I admire in rock journalism. He put out a better book that's called We Got the Neutron Bomb, The Untold Story of L.A. Punk. I think oral histories are invaluable. I always prefer to hear a song, like a story of a song by who wrote it. Call me crazy. And I think and I know it's just as curated as like any prose biography, and what's left out is as important as what's being left in. But even an account from some roadie on some tour is more valuable to me than what a journalist might imagine have happened in a scenario. So that book in particular, I want to say, is my favorite piece of rock journalism, because I'm fascinated with that time and place, which is kind of unheralded. Everyone knows everything about fucking CBGBs, man. We all get it. We know, And we've all had the debate, where did the punk come from? Which I always think about SLC punk, like, what does it matter where it came from?
Talking about who started punk rock music. Was it Sex Pistols in England? Was it the Ramones and the Velvet Underground in New York? It's the Ramones and the Sex Pistols. Who cares who started it?
But having said that, it clearly started in New York, and like a wave, it went over to London, and then when that wave came back, it fucking devoured the United States and got over to Los Angeles, which is where the actual interesting punk scene begins in America. And if you want to know more about that, then I would encourage people to check out We Got the Neutron Bomb, which, by the way, is a great title for a book.
Well, it's taken, I believe, was that not the Nerves? That's a song. It's a great song. Why am I blanking on the band name?
I don't know, because
Weirdos.
I know
I think it's the Weirdos.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it might be. I know it's a song too. No idea who sang it.
Yeah, I would highly recommend it if you like that. Alice Bagg, who is one of my heroes. She, of course, lead singer of the band, the punk band, the Bags, LA. On her website, she has a curation of dozens of interviews with the various women of that scene. My problem with that book is I felt like it was very heavy on the dudes.
Oh yeah, like 100%.
And
it's heavy It's heavy up because Brendan Mullen is the co-author of that, and Brendan Mullen's contribution to the scene is basically owning the Mask, like nightclub.
Brendan Mullen's cool. I mean, he was very good to Steven Sadian, who, as you guys know, anybody probably knows of me, because I love Steven and I'm writing a book on his art. But no, I mean, they talk more to Kim Fowley than they do to and I have a weird love for Kim Fowley, but I don't know. It is interesting, but I highly recommend Alice Bagg's site for that. And
they can complement each other. There doesn't have to be one or the other. Everybody read everything about the LA punk scene. And I totally agree with you about the sort of more dudes than not sort of policy with that book. But Let me just say about We Got the Neutron Bomb. It contains one of my favorite quotes of all time about the Cramps, which is somebody said, when the Cramps got to town, we realized how much of American culture was left to destroy. And that, to me, just, like, touches my heart.
I have a follow-along to that, Father Malone. Have you ever read the book, The Hepatitis Bathtub? It's an oral history of the band NoFX.
No, I've not.
I also...
Oh, wow.
Writing it down.
Can't claim to be a huge NoFX fan, but if you're looking for oral histories, I agree, are some of the best books if you want to get the straight scoop on this stuff. And this is, written by the band members about their time, starting out as punks in LA and everything leading up. And it's fantastic.
I read one about
really,
the
really
DC punk scene too, which I cannot remember the title or who wrote it or whatever, but like this sort of same format detailing that scene as well.
And also, I do have to give a shout out to two other cities of punk origins. Detroit, baby, which in some ways I think you could argue Detroit maybe had a little step up towards punk a little faster than New York, but New York had more of the trajectory. And a little town that doesn't get enough love that I know you guys are familiar with is the Boston punk scene. Boston had some great punk music.
No, it didn't. It was lame.
What?
Everyone in Boston is lame. People who are living in Boston or adjacent to it right now are also lame.
I feel like that's, sir. No, sir. That's a no. That's a no. And you know what you did was wrong.
All right, fine.
Boston
is great. I love it.
I will have to throw my copy. I will beat you with my copy of Please Kill Me Later. My pick is of course punk adjacent. But it's two writers. And one, of course, I cannot go without mentioning Lester Bangs, who is one of my heroes, my spiritual writing godheads. And the thing I love about Lester so much is his heart. Like, he was a great writer, but he was hard. Even when I don't agree with him, there's a lot of times I'll read something of his that I would not agree with, but his voice is compelling. And I think to me, that's what makes great writing, is if it has a pulse. If it has that heart, especially writing about art, like anything creative, like if you don't give a shit, then why are you doing it, baby? Like, don't do it. If you're not into it, don't do it. There's other things you could be doing with your time and your life. And Lester could be so funny. He could be savage, but he was always like so human. It was never about his ego. Like if he fucked up, he's, like the MC5, his first review of the MC5 famously trashed them. And then he went back to listen to them and he was like, fuck, I was wrong. And ended up becoming friends with the band. And, so Lester Bangs spent an associative hit I do want to highlight for this is Robert Duncan, who was another alumni of Cream. Robert Duncan is phenomenal, like sweet guy, because he's on social media, super nice, fantastic writer. He has a new book out called Loudmouth, which is kind of a slightly fictionalized, basically autobiography about his childhood and, being in a band in the late 60s, and, moving to New York, being friends with Lester, hanging out with, Peter Loeffner, who was one of the founding members of Para Ubu. And just, it's hilarious. It's touching. Robert Duncan has I can see why, you read some of his old rock writings and they're great. And he, has that he can be absolutely hilarious and irreverent, but he always kind of feels like a friend. Like, feels like that really cool friend that you kind of, that you're like, I'm going to listen to this guy. I want his thoughts. Like, you guys are like my little Robert Duncans. And because you both that's why I love doing the show. I love having friends with great taste. And that's what I have with Father Malone and HP.
Not really.
So thank you guys. Fuck you.
The only measure of our taste is that that you're friends with us. That's all.
Oh, what? Yeah.
That's
Stop.
That's right.
But enough of this love fest. I want to get into some juicy old. I'm calling upon the spirits of Marie Laveau because I'm about to curse some people. Not literally, of course. That's bad mojo. But if you guys don't mind, I'd like to go straight into mine, which
Dealer's choice.
I part of me hates doing this because I don't. Everything is subjective, and I'll say this obviously. Wait, we don't even need to preface this. If we did something that we got
opinions,
love,
y'all dig it or fuck off.
There's a book called Rip It Up, which is about new wave and post-punk music, and I bought it super stoked years ago when it first came out, because I love post-punk music. I find new wave was basically a marketing term, but post-punk is where, like, in some ways, the ashes of the punk scene, particularly in the UK and in the US, created all kinds of really divergent types of bands, some of whom I think you can't even truly classify to this day. And that could be any band from, like, kind of a weird one-off band like Dalek I Love You to, say, the Chameleons or the Bolshoi. I mean, you had all kinds of mini genres. I mean, we basically got modern goth rock out of that. You got synth pop out of that. You got hardcore punk out of the initial, as the other thing is, like, OG punk was actually a lot more diverse than people give it credit for too. But I was so excited to get this book, and it was so fucking boring and so dry. It was so dry, and that's, like, it breaks my heart, because I'm like, how can you, like, if you're into academic stuff, you'll love it.
What is the name of this publication again?
Well, the book is called Rip It Up.
Okay.
And it's about post-punk, but I have friends that love this book. So if you're into that kind of thing, maybe you'll like it. But for me, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing, and it just did not, for me, have a pulse to it. And there was way too much written about Scritti Politti, like Tuxedo Moon. Got
Any
like
amount
two
is
paragraphs.
too much writing about Scritti Politti.
No, I'm sorry. There's like almost like a fucking chapter on Scritti Politti, and Tuxedo Moon gets 2 paragraphs. Are you shitting me? Tuxedo Moon are amazing. Come on, like, Tuxedo Moon that's a band you cannot classify. To this day, there's nothing about Tuxedo Moon that sounds dated. They are. Or bands like DNA, like the whole no wave scene.
Dance with me. Big face. Blonde red hair.
You're writing about that subject. You have the riches given to you, and you're just gonna I'm just Scritti Politti. I don't even hate Scritti Politti, but goddamn.
Scritti Politti, I've now realized, is a band name I hear about once every 10 years. So thank you for providing the 10-year anniversary of Scritti Politti in my brain, and now I don't have to think about it again for another decade.
The curse has been put to rest by now, but enough of my hullabaloo. Father Malone.
Much like my favorite journalist, I don't really have a particular subject as far as criticism goes, rock criticism goes, that I hate. Rather, it's a collective. And the worst rock criticism is 100% from Rolling Stone magazine.
Yes! Preach it to the mountain.
No, listen, I'm not talking about the very early years, the 65, 66, the rebellious, hey, you got to hear this band, Rolling Stone. I'm talking about the tail end of the 60s and into the 70s and on into irrelevance. When it all became kind of all too snarky. I'm going to read again now, but I'm going to do so happily. These are some choice cuts of reviews that Rolling Stone magazine has offered over the years. Now that the freshness of their Dorks on Parade shtick has worn off, the Giants, New York singer-songwriters John Flansburgh and John Linnell, need to prove themselves an all-out novelty act or trenchant musical parodists. Judging from Flood, they are unwilling to make either commitment or are simply incapable of doing so. The 19 ditties crammed onto the album, sophomoric throwaways, Particle Man, ersatz jazz, Hotcha, and country, Lucky Ball and Chain, and an overdose of their standard issue Oopa Pop aren't as ingratiating as the Giants think they are. Fuck you, David Brown. February 22nd, 1990 issue of Rolling Stone magazine.
Confidentially, I never told you of her charm. Confidentially, we never had a home. But this railroad apartment was the perfect place when she'd sit and hold me in her arms.
Here's one from October the 20th of 1977. Richard Hell has been touted as an underground genius for nearly 3 years, and this debut album boldly tries to document him as such. The result is 30-odd minutes of grinding sadomasochistic rock. Love Comes in Spurts has all the earmarks of the younger New York bands. A half-sobbed, double-time lead vocal, patently dumb backup singing, and chattering dual guitars. But hell, confident that his presence in lyrics can transcend so artless a rock medium, likes to wallow in it. This tends to make an 8-minute song like Another World sound like beatnik indulgence. The Fugs did the same thing as a jug band much more wittily. That's a review of Richard Hell.
Who was that? Who was that writer?
Fred Schroers.
Yeah. Also, "Love Comes in Spurts" is one of Richard Hill's best songs. Fight me on that.
Oh my god!
That song fucking rocks.
I read the words and it starts resonating in my head, and this guy's just like, meh, it's kind of a poppy tune.
At least he mentioned the Fugs, though. He's better than that "They Might Be Giants" guy. Jesus.
Here's one for you, Heather.
Oh no! Oh no!
These guys synthesize trenchant experimental trends into a hodgepodge that's compelling only to those without the intellectual vigor to penetrate the band's surface pose to find the real pose underneath. Most of the concepts on their second album, Duty Now for the Future, have been recycled from Frank Zappa, the Yardbirds, and other 60s avant-gardists, and the handful of original notions they do try to express are mostly lame or fraudulent. As rock and roll, this sort of stuff is a horror show that dispenses with backbeat, melody, and raw emotion, i.e., all the things that ever made rock worthwhile. When I finish typing this, I'm taking a hammer to Duty Now for the Future, lest it corrupt anyone dumb or innocent enough to take it seriously. That review was written by Dave Marsh.
But it's okay. Lester beat him up in a parking lot.
As well he should have. Marsh, in 1991, wrote a book, an anti-censorship book. The guy who's going to smash a Devo record lest it corrupt others wrote and sold a book decrying censorship. I could go on. I have a lot more, but you got the idea. Now, I know every publication or periodical is going to have ups and downs, and they'll employ some people who make some mistakes and everything. But the sheer volume of not just snark, but dismissive, kind of cliquey, you don't belong here, we're the rock gatekeeper fucking attitude from this rag that was just used to sell fucking, CDs in a whiskey for the past fucking 50 years. It's inexcusable, and fuck them.
Oh, 100%. No, and unless we
But I love Ben Fong Torres. And obviously Hunter Thompson
rules.
And blah, 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 blah. We've heard they've sung their own praises long enough that they've convinced us that they aren't a piece of shit when it comes to actual rock writing, which is what the whole purpose was supposed to be, right?
Yeah, well, every time I see Jan Winter's fucking memoir at Barnes & Noble, I always, if nobody's looking, I give it the finger. This guy, not only did he fired Lester Bangs because Lester gave a negative review to Canned Heat, and that pissed off a record exec.
You know what I think of when I think of Jan Winter? Did you ever see the movie Perfect with John Travolta and Jamie Lee Curtis, where he's a journalist infiltrating the scene, the aerobics scene, and he's working for Rolling Stone magazine. And at one point, he calls Jan Winter, who's hosting a fondue party, and he's wearing an apron, dipping a stick into this bubbling vat of cheese, and I think, perfect.
That motherfucker. I can't stand him. Yeah. Fuck Jan Winter. And I agree 100%. I can't wait. HP.
Mine, I don't have a specific target in mind. This is kind of more of a blanket catch-all of things that I hate in terms of writing. And it's not limited to music necessarily, but that's the focus of my personal reading. And that is ghost-written music autobiographies.
Ooh.
I have, at one time or another, read every book by every member of the group KISS, from Paul Stanley to Peter Criss.
Oh, God. Yeah, I've read the Paul one.
You've read the it's called Live to Win or something.
Yeah.
I think Peter Criss's was called like Break Up to Make Up or something. I've read Ace Frehley's, which was called No Regrets. It should have been called No Regrets. I think it would have been funnier, but
It's always funnier.
Yes.
so there's something. I think there's something. Well, first of all, in an ideal situation, if somebody is dictating their life story to somebody, then you should get this person's voice loud and clear. But I think the problem is, I think honestly, most musicians, most rock musicians, maybe classic rock musicians in particular, are just idiots. They don't have a lot of. I think they fancy themselves. It's like the Spinal Tap thing. They fancy themselves as being sort of smarter than they are, and maybe with more to say and more to contribute. But the fact is, most of these musicians have achieved success at a very young age, and really kind of stopped progressing intellectually during that time period for when they achieve their success. And it's painfully obvious when you read. I always feel a lot of sympathy because in my mind I'm seeing like some poor ghostwriter, like feverish, like he has all these cassette tapes of conversations he's had with Ace Frehley, and he's thinking to himself, how the fuck am I going to make this into a coherent narrative? Like, one minute he's talking about Paul, the next minute he's talking about crashing his car into a tree, and then he's talking about his music studio and how do I... And that's fine. They got to work. They need to eat. These ghostwriters, that's fine. If they can, it's good work, I'm sure, if you can get it. But I think I'm going to have to take a hiatus from reading music autobiographies. I mean, it's just... I should know what I'm getting into, but it's not interesting to me. It's oftentimes, like I said, it feels like somebody trying to inflate their life into something bigger than it actually was. And you would think the salacious bits would be interesting, but I find them kind of sad to read somebody who's looking back, like Peter Criss, on his life at 70-something or whatever, and really trying to build himself up to something more than maybe he was. I don't know. The lack of a real voice drives me nuts, and I think it's a cheap way to cash in on someone's success. Ugh, ghostwritten music autobiographies are the worst for me.
I know a ghostwriter.
You know somebody who ghostwrites for a living?
Yeah. I can't tell you what they've written or who they are, but I will tell you off the air.
Okay, I look forward.
And you're
to
right.
That.
People got to make a living. But I also totally agree with you. Ghostwritten autobiographies, what a joke! Can I throw a couple of more logs on the fire that is rock criticism or journalism, quote unquote, that I hate, real quick?
Mm-hmm.
If the spirit moves you, go for it.
Albert Goldman. You guys familiar with Albert Goldman?
Of course.
He wrote that John Lennon book that was just really a hit piece.
The Lives of John Lennon or something.
Lives of John Lennon.
Albert Goldman is a rock critic or journalist or biographer. Really, he's just a bitter fucking prick of a man who I think was really mad at everything culturally that occurred post 59 or something like that, and even before that a little bit. I think anything rock and roll really related, because boy, he went after Elvis with a ferocity and accused every one of his subject matters of the same sort of salacious things, and it was just no joy in the music at all. That there was no. I think he's one of these awful muckrakers who I think believes they're actually performing a service and shining the light on all the depravity or unsavory behavior that, tears our idols down and makes them human. You can do that, but you have to balance it out with what was joyous about the person to begin with, because otherwise it's all the Stations of the Cross, we know he was treated badly. We watched him get whipped and beaten. Why are we reveling in it?
We've got one last question for our holy trinity of love and hate. We're going to go to everybody's favorite and probably not so favorite topic, classic rock lyrics. Now, not all lyrics are created the same. Some have the spirit of poetry to move you, while others make you want to basically annihilate the entire sperm bank of whatever, Clear Channel, Abomination, Buffalo Wild Wings, Hoedown. that is going on. I'm sorry. I feel like I just had a mini vapor thinking about the one I hate so much because it's terrible. But we're going to start with love. We need some love. And HP, give us your favorite classic rock lyric, one that
Sure.
moves, that you think is just exquisite in its formation.
Sure. And this is more recent. I don't know. The tag classic, maybe a bit of a stretch. I think this is a classic lyric, but your mileage may vary. I'm going to probably my all-time favorite, which is David Bowie.
Yes.
And just to sort of set the stage, this lyric is from the song "Where Are We Now," which is from the album The Next Day, which was released it was a surprise release in 2013. And I'll get to the lyric itself in a minute, but just to remind people what an extraordinary event it was that this album even came out. Bowie had a heart attack in 2004. He was on stage and he suffered a heart attack, and I think he had to have an angioplasty. And he, aside from a couple of appearances here and there and some soundtrack work, no one had heard anything from him in 9 years. Then all of a sudden, one day in 2013, out of nowhere, literally out of nowhere, he dropped this album The Next Day, which really, for me, it harkened back to his best work. Some of the albums he did, the Berlin trilogy he did, Tony Visconti, the producer, actually reunited with him on this album. And the lyric, I'll tell you, the lyric is at the very end of the song. It's the last bit that he really sings. And I'm not going to sing it because you don't want to hear that, but I'll read
Incorrect.
it. He repeats this a couple of times. He says, as long as there's sun, as long as there's fire, as long as there's me, as long as there's you. And he repeats this a couple of times as the song sort of trails out.
As long as there's fire, as long as there's me, as long as there's you.
It was such a remarkable thing. We all collectively, I'll lump myself in with the rest of the fans, we thought that he was done, that he maybe had put out his last album and maybe he would never be omnipresent in the culture again. And for this to come out of nowhere, this gift of an album, to really sort of prove to people and show people I'm still here. And that's part of what this lyric really means to me. That's really why it touches me, because it felt like he was saying, look, I'm not going to be here forever, but I will be here for a while. I'm going to hang on as long as I can. As long as I can, I'm going to be here. And so are you. We'll be here, and this is the way things are. And even now, when I think about it, and you hear his voice, and he really evolved in his later years into the sort of more of the Scott Walker crooner that I really dug. He leaned, as his upper register kind of started to go away, he leaned into that sort of bass in his voice. And he just, in this song, he sounds every bit the sort of tired, wise sort of, singer that he's been, musician. But it gave me hope, and it made me feel good. He's still here. He's still here. He's still in the firmament. Bowie is still here, and he's still giving us fucking great music.
Oh, man. Beautiful pick. I love that. I love David Bowie. Father Malone.
Yes. What are we
Ellis,
doing? Favorite
we need to
classic
know-
rock lyric?
Yes.
Little old lady got mutilated late last night. Werewolves of London again.
Werewolves
Ow,
of
woo.
London again.
Little old lady got mutilated late last night. Werewolves of London again.
Listen to that
Words
again.
on.
Little old lady got mutilated late last night. Werewolves of London again. I know it's just alliteration, and it shouldn't tickle me as much as it does, but what a beautiful grouping of words in both sound and content. It's an easy question for me to answer. What's your favorite? It's up there in favorite lyrics of all time. I don't know what order they're in, but it's definitely up there. So
you know, when I'm talking love and bands that get filed in a classic rock, I have to mention Blue Oyster Cult. I'm a massive,
Nice.
massive BOC fan. Seen them live twice. I hope to see them live even more. They're just their current lineup's phenomenal. Like, and that new album, The Symbol Remains, is excellent. But my pick is not off that album. I'm going with a quote from Joan Crawford, which is a great creepy song, the music video. But these lyrics, the thing I love about BOC is they're so good about having almost like witchy lyrics. Very, at times, almost like mystical, so cheesy, but definitely dark. I mean, you understand why writers like Stephen King considers himself a huge fan of Blue Oyster Cult. And they also worked with Michael Moorcock, who is tied to one of my other favorite bands, Full Time Hawkwind. But from Joan Crawford, these series of lyrics: junkies down in Brooklyn going crazy. They're laughing just like hungry dogs in the street. Policemen are hiding behind the skirts of little girls. Their eyes have changed the color of frozen meat.
Junkies down in Brooklyn are going crazy. They're laughing just like hungry dogs in the street. Policemen are hiding behind the skirts of little girls. Their eyes have turned the color of frozen meat.
What a great line that is. It's so instantly creepy. It's evocative. It's chilling. I just love it. What a spooky little lady I am, I guess.
No, it's fantastic. And I think Blue Oyster Cult are a very underrated band. I mean,
Yes.
they're fantastic. We don't hear enough. It's easy to overlook them in favor of, other bands that, like we already talked about Sabbath, but Cult is great. And they're on the heavy metal soundtrack. I mean, what more do you need? The veteran of a psychic war.
Oh my God, they're so good.
Yes.
Are they
One of my
burning for
favorite
you?
songs of all time. Yes.
Okay.
And they don't fear the Reaper either.
Some
Blue
of these
Oyster
songs
Hit
have
Machine.
Great lyrics.
Their music
think about,
stands
up. Their song
It does,
ETI, which is off of, I believe it's off of Agents of Fortune, and that's 76, 77, has the lyric about
Looks by blameless and by the dead. King in yellow, the queen in red.
like a reference to the King in Yellow, that 1916 book, which people talked about with that show. What was that show on HBO that everybody talked about? I forgot, that had Woody Harrelson in it.
Sure.
And, like,
True Detective?
True Detective.
Oh, yeah.
It's the first season, I guess, had something to do with the 1916 book, The King in Yellow, which is like a Lovecraftian type thing. I haven't read it, so nobody get mad at me. My point is Blue Oyster Cult rock, and you're right, 100% HP. Everybody should check out Blue Oyster Cult. That discography is stacked. But we cannot. This is a little too ooey gooey. We gotta get into some piss and vinegar. Father Malone, what is a lyric you hate?
I'm not going to recite, but
Please do.
no.
Please.
It's one particular song. And is everyone familiar with the musical artist known as Meatloaf?
Of course.
Of course.
Of course. And, of course, the breakthrough album, Bat Out of Hell. It's a fucking fantastic
Yes.
album. Jim
Yeah.
Steinman is one hell of a fucking
I
lyricist.
missed Jim Steinman. Missed him.
He's amazing. Paradise by the Dashboard Light is a near perfect song, except it has the most infuriating fucking bridge of all time with Phil Rizzuto narrating this guy trying to get to home base with the girl. I'm gonna cut it in here.
Center, and here comes the throw, and what a throw! He's gonna slide in head first. Here he comes. He's out. No, wait, safe at second base. This kid really makes things happen out there.
It makes me want to bang my head against the wall. Sincerely, just because it's so fucking clumsy. First of all, in the how many base did you get to third base with her? Like dramatized. And at the end, they got poor Phil Rizzuto to do it. It's just so juvenile and like subpar National Lampoon skit cut into what is an epic tale of young lust and love.
I never minded that because to me it was just like, I know that my favorite part is coming, where Ellen Foley screams out, "Stop right there!" Like, oh, the power
Oh,
of
yeah.
Ellen Foley. Like, holy shit.
You need that build up, no question about it. But do it musically. Don't have Phil Rizzuto do it like a fuck. Like they're not listening to the fucking ball game on the radio when they're making out. They're listening to a fucking great song, which is what we're trying to do. Don't do this.
So, this isn't a single lyric. I'm just going to say the whole song, and it pains me to say this because this is one of my favorite bands of all time, and I'm in kind of a classic rock mode.
We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel. How dare you? That's a modern masterpiece. It's not even classic rock.
The man is a national treasure. No, it's even worse than that. And the song that I just collectively hate, I hate everything about this song, but particularly I hate the lyrics. And the song is Obla Dee, Obla Da by the Beatles. Obla Dee, Obla Da, life goes on, la la la, life goes on. Desmond takes a trolley to the jewelry store, buys a 20-carat golden ring. The White Album, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. You've got, Dear Prudence. You've got Helter Skelter, of course.
Oh my God, what a good song.
It's great.
Paul McCartney wrote that song?
He did, and it was supposedly he wanted to write the sweatiest rock and roll song ever made, and he came damn close.
Didn't he say he wanted to write the song that he expected to hear when somebody told him he had to listen to The Who? They built it up like, it's just noise, it's just fucking, they're just banging on instruments. And then he listened to it and he was like, well, yeah, okay, I guess it's kind of okay. And then he tried to replicate what he thought they were going to be. Is that true?
Right.
Is that apocryphal? If it didn't happen, it should have.
I know the Who did figure into the story. I don't remember the particulars. Your version sounds as right as any. I thought it was something like it was like a one-upsmanship thing where he heard a song and he's like, oh, I can do better than that. It's great. Paul, when he puts his mind to it, is capable of genius. Obla Dee, Obla Da is not genius. Obla Dee, Obla Da is twee, just like verbal diarrhea. I hate it.
Yes.
To me, it's nothing more than a press of the old skip button in the car when it comes on. When everybody accuses Paul of being this sort of sentimental kind of songwriter who's very old-fashioned, and that's certain. This is the thing that proves that case. If you believe that about Paul McCartney, and you hear Obla Dee, Obla Da, it'll seal the deal for you. Case closed. So, yeah, like I said, it pains me to say it, but because I love the Beatles, and I do enjoy Paul McCartney, but Obla Dee, Obla Da is just so infuriatingly sweet.
Be ever after in the marketplace.
Shut up, man. Get back to Penny Lane already.
I feel confident that mine is by far the worst.
Oh, boy.
Because Bob Seger's Night Moves.
Oh,
is
boy.
a song
I'm so excited. Please continue.
Now, HP, much like what you said about Obla Dee, Obla Da, I would say about this. I hate this entire song. I think it's boomer nostalgia at its most disgusting, and written by somebody when he was still young. Like, you're being nostalgic for shit that happened like 15 years ago.
Bob Seger was an old man when he was writing songs at the age of 20.
That's sad. But the worst part of all the insipid lyrics in this song, there's this line, and I'm not going to quote it directly because I feel like I'd be opening like the portal to Ibon or something if I did it. But it's like he talks about, being with this girl and that she had, quote unquote, points of her own some way up high. And it's like, okay, yeah, we get it. Titties. We're talking about titties, right?
She was a black-haired beauty with big dark eyes and points all her own, sitting way up high. Way up firm and high.
Talking about boobs now.
No. Yeah, talking about way up firm and high. And it's like, and so I'm like, great, fuck you, Bob Seger. Now, not only have you made, okay, boobs. Yeah, boobs are great. I would respect him more if it was called Boob Moves than Night Moves. Like, it's just like him trying to be cheeky. Like, get it? It's like having somebody's disgusting uncle or dad elbow you and
elbowing you.
Like, hey, I got to,
you get it? You get it?
Yeah. it's fucking revolting, and I don't want to. Number one, I don't want to think about Bob Seger copping a feel. Okay, I definitely don't want to think about anybody copping a feel to this fucking song. You talk about listen, the entire discography of Meatloaf is infinitely more bangable than one bar of Night Moves. And I don't want to bang to Meatloaf. I love Meatloaf, but it ain't banging music.
Are there any Bob Seger songs that are bangable?
If you mean with like a sledgehammer.
Can you put on a Bob Seger tune and fuck, I guess is what I'm asking?
Gross. No. I feel like it's like, I mean, not to get personal, but I feel like there'd be like some mummification going on.
Do you oh my God. Do you think that character you're describing, the narrator of the song Night Mood, the sort of creepy kind of uncle who like, you know, probably has like a nudie picture in his wallet that'll show you and you're just like, dude, what are you doing? Like, do you think that character carries over throughout his Bob Seger's oeuvre?
Oh, totally. Like he's totally like hear it against the wind while he's drinking his fucking like Bud Light or or Miller Lite, and he's got that one tear like, oh, Bob Seger gets it, brother. Bob Seger gets the plight of the working man. No, he doesn't. He's a fucking rock star. No rock star understands the plight of the working class. Okay, that includes some of the ones that I like. No, you at a point you are never going to be fully tuned to the working class when you've lived in a bubble for X amount of time.
But he wrote songs, you know, describing situations that everyone can relate to. Like when you go into a diner, when you get off your tour bus and people are making fun of you because you have long hair.
I hate that song too. Like, I fucking hate that song. No, I hate it. Is it a woman or a man?
Turn
like
the page.
Anybody listen. Only thing I hate more is fucking Don Henley and like his fucking solo oeuvre. I don't like most of the Eagles either, but there's at least a few Eagles tunes sung by Joe Walsh that, I mean, I love me some Joe Walsh, straight up. I have nothing but love in my heart for the Walsh.
It was a super group. They were bound to have some hits. No, sorry. Yeah. Like they all seem like a bunch of dickheads singly, like, for the most part, but like, you know, they had some good songs. Even Don Henley's solo work, there's some of his shit that I like, and he just seems like a personal person.
I don't mind Dirty Laundry. The rest of it can go jump in a lake of fire.
Now, I got news for you. Don Henley's a first-class asshole. You ask anybody, they'll tell you that.
I thought you were about to tell us something.
Such a prick. No. But I will say, to get it back to Night Moves, like the interesting thing, I have a kind of a complicated.
Are we trying to make some front page news?
When I think of Night Moves, I don't think of Bob Seger ogling some poor girl's, chest. I think of the climax of the movie American Pop by Ralph Bakshi.
Songs.
Which is...
I got songs for sale instead of drugs, man. It's Bob Seger. I'm the future of rock.
That is an excellent, mimicry of that end there, but Father Malone. But what I thought was interesting is, that plays in that's one of the songs at the end. That's the song that the culmination of many generations of striving and working for the American dream. It all comes down to somebody playing Night Moves in front of the executive. But here's the thing. What I later found out, I don't know, maybe you knew this, Father Malone, actually himself hated that he had to use Night Moves. Did you know this?
No. What did he want instead? It's funny because we had this conversation a long time ago where I was making the point that you're making now. Like, that's supposed to be the future of rock and roll, fucking Bob Seger. And so what was Bakshi?
Bakshi originally wanted to use Freebird by Leonard Skinner.
Oh, no.
As the climax.
No.
But
that would have been better.
It would have been better. It would have been better, but it still would have been it was already the past.
It still would have been bad, but apparently the Skinner had wanted too much money to have the song in the movie, so his plan B was Bob Seger and his Ode to Americana.
He should have gotten AC/DC is who he should have gotten. Somebody like that, somebody who's going to last.
At least somebody like Todd Rundgren. At least get a forward-thinking rocker.
Todd is God. We'll get into some Todd Rundgren. I didn't know you like Todd Rundgren.
I love Todd Rundgren. Oh my God,
I got
several Utopia albums on vinyl alone, baby.
I
love me some Todd Rundgren.
Chasm Sultan, he's a beast. I love Chasm. Anyway, we'll get into that later.
You know what I don't hate? Our listeners. Thank you guys so much for listening. Before we wrap this kitty cat up, let's get a little pluggy plug going on here. Father Malone, where can the good people listen to you and find you and see your amazing work?
If you want to see the visual things I do, go to fathermalone.com. But that will also link you to the audio stuff. One of those links being weirdingwaymedia.com, which is the music conglomerate I'm stuck to. That has my audio offerings like Dark Destinations and Astounding Tales of the Public Domain and other things like that.
Perfect. Thank you. And HP, where can the good people find you? And please also let them know about your Bandcamp.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'd love to. So I too am among the, as I've heard Father Malone describe it, the galaxy of stars on the Weirding Way Network. You can hear me on the Wolf and Raisin Banachek podcast, the Night Mr. Walters Taxi podcast as well. I've done some guesting on the Culture Cast, this fine show. You can also hear some of my music interspersed in some of the Dark Destination stuff. And as Heather so graciously mentioned, I have a Bandcamp, HP Boston. I don't have the address right here, unfortunately, but if you just search for HP in Boston, you'll find it. I got a couple albums up there. Please give me my first sale, I beg of you. Thank you.
Please, everybody. That sweet little theme music that is for Noise Junkies, that was courtesy of HP. So we're very blessed.
All the music, all the good music at Weirding Way is HP's doing. Like, sincerely. He's like on so many goddamn shows, everybody.
There
thank
you go.
So much.
There you go. The music don't lie. And of course, you can find me over at my website, mondoheather.com. And also, you can find my latest article, which is about the British serial killer art house film, The Cold Light of Day, over on arrowfilms.com blog. So check that out and check out all of the Weirding Way shows. Thank you guys so much for listening. We love you. Be good to each other. And most importantly, be good to yourselves.